Welcome to Belief, Being, and Beyond with your host, Granddaughter Crow. As the Veil Thins series, join us as Granddaughter Crow interviews spiritual leaders in riveting conversations about this time of year. Hi, everybody. Granddaughter Crow here for yet another episode and or series to an episode on Belief, Being, and Beyond. I am doing the series As the Veil Thins. And in this series, I'll be bringing you a lot of different people talking about different ways to perceive autumn, fall, sleep, death, Samhain, etc. And I have someone back that I truly admire and the work, and I absolutely loved our last conversation. I have Jamie Waggoner here. Hi, say hi, Jamie.
Hi, thank you so much for having me back. I also really enjoyed our conversation last time, and I'm really excited to be back on your channel.
Oh, it's so lovely to have you because in doing this series, you were a no-brainer. I'm like, oh, please, Lord Hades, send me Jamie. Just like, could he?
Well, I am probably one prayer that he could answer that in that way. So, please, Lord Hades, send me Jamie. We have like a direct line going most of the time. So
Yeah. So he looped you in, and
yeah,
yeah,
right.
I love it. I absolutely love it. So, for those who have not yet heard of Jamie, let me just give you guys a little bit of the official bio. So, Jamie Waggoner is an author, pagan priestess, and occult expert. She has been practicing for over 25 years, and she's the author of Hades, Myths and Magic and Modern Devotion. You guys pick that up. It was released in 2025, and there is so much information in there for anybody who wants more on this topic that we're even talking about. Also, you can follow her because she's a contributor at Witchology magazine, Haunted magazine. I think we're about ready to talk about the hunt, and so I'm like the Hunted magazine, no, the Haunted magazine, and the feminine mark. I don't know how to say this word.
Oh, it's the
Female.
feminine macabre. Yeah, the feminine macabre. So like,
Thank you.
it's a cool project. It's actually my friend Amanda's project. And you should check that out too. It's a paranormal journal and it's written by the contributors are all women or non-binary writers writing about the paranormal. And they write about all kinds of topics. It could be haunting, it could be paranormal investigation, it could be magic, tarot, history, any kind, anything that's kind of related to that arena because women and non-binary folks are often really misrepresented or underrepresented
Yes.
in the paranormal community because we see a lot of like the I like to call them the bro dudes TV shows where you have like the tough guys in the black shirts and they're yelling at ghosts and things like that. And Amanda with this project with the journals is really bringing a different voice and a different flavor to that. And I'm actually in volume number 4, and I think Amanda has 6 or 7 volumes out at this point.
I'm gonna
But
have to
yeah,
check
you
that
can get
out.
yeah.
I am
So I'll just
definitely gonna
plug my
follow.
friend Amanda there.
Absolutely. Call out, shout out to Amanda, and thank you, thank you for that. I
Yeah.
absolutely love it. And also, one of the other things that Jamie is in is a co-founder and teacher of Way of the Weaver, and it is an inclusive program of magical inquiry, social justice, and community building. And we will take some time to talk about that as well. Actually, just go ahead and tell us what is the Way of the Weaver? Yeah, what is she?
Well, so this is my collaborative teaching project with my really good friend Murphy. If you haven't figured it out right now, I do a lot of partnerships and collaborations with folks because I just really love the spirit of that. I love working together in community. And so Murphy and I, our teaching program has a lot of different facets to it. We run a witchy summer camp for grown-ups every June. It's always the last week of June. It's in Vermont. We also have a longer program that takes place over about 5 months where we kind of give you a really solid foundation in magical technology. So spell work, ritual, trance journey, all of those kinds of things. But our viewpoint that we come from is we want to teach it almost like an open source technology so that you learn sort of the basics and the foundation of how to do it, but then you can come back and take it to your own practice and your own community and, use it in the way that makes sense to you.
Oh,
So,
that's so
yeah,
beautiful.
it's great. And I think upcoming, so those things are already either past or in progress by the time this will come out. But the thing that will be upcoming still will be our winter module. And our winter modules run January through March, and they're always online, which is why we do them in the winter because it's you know, like nobody wants to be out, online when it's great outside, but when it's winter, okay, sure. So, coming up this January, we will be having a spell work course. It's called Spells for the Resistance. So it'll be really fun. And I encourage people to check that out if they're interested.
I love that it's all online too. And you can probably find it at your website, which is www.jamiewaggoner.com, JamieWaggoner.
It's okay. It's a variation on Waggoner. It's JamieWaggoner.com.
Thank you for that.
You're
Thank you for
welcome.
that. I
No
absolutely love
worries.
it. So, we're going to kick this off. This series is As the Veil Thins. And I really wanted to have you on because of your perspective of Hades, the underworld, your devout practice, and also modern divination practices, and responsible practices and self work and all of that. But really, to talk to us from your perspective as an occultist and a priestess or a priestess. I know you mentioned that last time. Before we get into talking about autumn and the fall and the seasons changing and Samhain and the underworld and all of that beautiful stuff, could you give us just a little bit of a flavor of what kind of witch are you? What kind of priestess are you?
I mean, I would say I'm definitely very eclectic. I consider myself to be a pagan polytheist, and within that realm, I'm a hard polytheist. So that means that I believe that all the gods are real. They are very distinct entities, and they all have their own agendas, concerns, purviews, all those kinds of things. And I just choose to work with a select few of them. So that kind of, in my practice, my magic has always been rooted in deity and devotion from the very beginning. So that's always been a part of my practice. And I would say, I would consider myself more of a ritualist, an esoteric herbalist. So that's using the herbs for magical purposes, and someone that is really into mythology and folklore and folk magic especially. I have studied things like high ceremonial magic and high ritual and the grimoire tradition and all of those things, but those aren't really my jam.
Gotcha.
I'm more of just I'm really into the real practical magic of the people and how that has like just carried us through as humans for millennia. So yeah.
That's so beautiful. And I also, in just looking at your body of work and everything that you do, you're very inclusive. You're very consciously inclusive of all bodies. And so, do you still do the Priest X thing? And if so, what is that? Because I loved
Yeah.
that. I've never heard it before. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm fine being referred to as a priestess, like ESS on the end, or a priest X, which is just an X on the end. So it's to add a little bit more gender fluidity to that term and to make it a little less binary. So, we're still kind of playing around with words, aren't we? That's what, like, so one of the most like wonderful things I think that's going on in culture right now, how we're having fun playing with language and we're making language a little more inclusive and we're trying things out, right? So this especially came out of Way of the Weaver, where we try to be very inclusive, very queer centric, all of these things. And so we're like, oh, PriestX, let's use that because that will kind of, cover a lot of ground. And in fact, I'm writing a book right now, sort of a follow-up to Hades. It's called One Foot in the Underworld, The Path of the Death Priestess. So it kind of is, it has a little bit in there about Hades, but it also just sort of it gives you a much deeper look into all of the other beings that live there and the landscape and all of that stuff, and how we can assist each other, magically and practically when it comes to those big transitions like death or loss of a job, friendships that end, loss of a home, things like that. Because there's many, many kinds of death. And as magical practitioners, if we have emotional intelligence around that, we can really help people a lot. One of the things we have in society right now, I think, is we have overwhelming collaborative grief and not many methods for dealing with it. And
Right.
that's why we really need death priestesses right now.
That's so beautiful. I mean, it really is. And I think one of the biggest things that I enjoy is that you just don't pontificate on all of this esoteric wisdom. You're actually like, and this is how we do it. This is practical. This is modern devotion. This is what it looks like in action. I had heard something the other day and it said, you can pray for what you wish, but the divine will hear your prayer, but answers your hands,
Oh,
blesses your hands. It hears
I
your
like
prayer,
it.
but blesses your hands. And it's basically like, put it into action, people. Now, I modified what I heard, as we all do, but it applies. And
Yeah,
it's kind of
yeah.
like, you're not just a let's light a candle and pray for the best. You're like, let's light a candle and then do this. And
Right, yeah. Yeah,
so necessary.
I like to provide things to people that are just accessible. I don't I'm not a fan of gatekeeping or hierarchies within magic or ritual or practice. So I like to, especially when, Murphy and I are teaching in Way of the Weaver, that's why we want to give people a solid foundation. Because if you understand how magic operates and works and how to build ritual and how to do all these things and to do them safely, then you can take them and become as adept as you want in the way that you want, right?
Yeah, it kind of
Mhm.
makes me think of like here's the kitchen, guys. Here's all the different tools. This is an oven, this is a refrigerator, this
Yeah.
is how you treat your fruits and vegetables. This is how you da 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 da. Whatever you make, you can make Italiano, or you can make Greek, or you can make a salad, or you can make vegan. That's what it's coming across. Am I kind of
Yeah.
on?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think you're on the right track. Totally.
I
Totally. Yeah.
think
And the other
that's
reason I like it because um to me it feels more empowering. It feels like, that in learning like that and practicing like that, I have more agency, you have more agency. It's really great. I really like that. So we try, and we're always doing better because we're always learning more. And we're always, updating and learning and growing. So
I
yeah.
love that. I love that. Well, it's so nice to have you on. So, as the veil thins, means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And basically, what I want to talk with you, let's introduce it starting like with autumn and the season of the autumnal equinox. And how do you perceive and approach that?
Yeah, so the autumnal equinox is actually one of the feast days that I celebrate in my Hades practice, and actually my whole household does it. My partner is the one that cooks for us, so he's the one that actually cooks all the food. And although he didn't want to take credit for it, the recipes in this book are his recipes. So y'all, I just have to like give the props where it needs to go. But What we do when it comes up to the autumn equinox, which is, that's the day in September where there's equal night and day, right? It's right before we switch from having more light to having more dark. So it's very liminal that time. And we make a big feast. And at that point in time, we actually set our table for four. It's for myself, my partner, and for Hades and for Persephone, because it's like a welcome home feast, right? Because she's returning to the underworld to serve as the queen of the underworld there. So we will make a big feast. We kind of theme the food toward, something that will correspond with Mediterranean food of that that area of the world, to honor where that comes from. And we'll just set out a table for four, and we will enjoy a feast. And we don't usually do this in silence. Like, we usually, my partner and I will chat with each other and chit chat, and we'll say things. And then after we're done, we this is like a modern modification of an ancient Greek way of giving offerings to the underworld. We go outside and dig like a shallow pit, because in ancient Greece, like, offerings for the underworld were always put into the ground. So we'll dig like a shallow pit. We'll take their plates and their drinks outside. We'll put them all in the thing. And we actually, I know this is like kind of silly, but we have a dog and we love dogs, so we put milk bones in there too. For
Absolutely.
Hades' three-headed dog. And and then we'll kind of cover it up. And then what you usually do to call the attention of the underworld is you stomp three times. So we'll officially like stomp three times to let them know that the offering is there. And we do that every autumn equinox. And there's a lot of traditions, and that's kind of a modern interpretation, right? But there are a lot of traditions that come to us through folklore about having a dinner for the dead, or a supper for the dead, or a silent dinner around these times of the year, right? Around the autumnal equinox. Some people like to do it on Samhain. And this is very similar to that tradition, right? And sometimes, so what people will do is make food, and they will feast with their ancestors or with their gods. They'll leave plates out for spirit. It can take a lot of forms. Like, sometimes the plates are left outside. Sometimes people do kind of what we do, like they set the table and then they take the plates out. Some people do it all in silence, right? So there's a lot of different ways to incorporate that, but I find it really fascinating that this idea of sitting down and having like an official kind of sit down dinner that honors unseen beings, whether they be gods or whether they be ancestors or other spirits, fae, elementals. It's something that is common across a lot of cultures at this particular time. So that's one tradition. That's what we do on the autumnal equinox.
I love it. My husband and I do a silent feast on Samhain, or right around that time. And we set the table, and we each get to choose two, and they aren't limited to ancestor. They can be deity like you, and they can be ancestor, but we only get enough to fill up the table, and we do the spread and we do that. So, but I didn't know about the milk bones. No, I just talk about modern divination, modern witchcraft. Get yourself some milk bones or kitty treats. I love.
Yeah, and actually, I mean, if you want to make something really special, again, there is a recipe to make like a sort of like bread or sort of biscuit that they had in the ancient world. Because in one of the texts that I studied, there was actually, the recommendation was to take some bread or some biscuits and soak it in milk and honey. So if you need to go to the underworld, you can distract Cerberus by giving him the food, and he'll go after the biscuits and the honey, and then you can kind of skedaddle on by.
Makes so much
So
sense. That
yeah.
makes so much sense. You got to get at least three, because I'm pretty sure, I think he has three heads, right? So,
Right, right.
oh my goodness, that actually
Yeah,
makes.
his well, I mean, of course, like, it's like anything else. Ancient literature and mythology is not a monolith, so there's all kinds of different descriptions of what he looks like, but it's most commonly accepted is a dog with three heads. So yeah.
I love it. I love it. So that's kind of kicking off the season for you and your practice, and then talking more about what else do you focus on with your practice when it comes to Samhain and the fall,
Mhm.
autumn, moving into that season, so that we can all get a little bit of a glimpse through your thinning veil.
Yeah. So, I mean, as it kind of progresses from, late September through to late October and where we're getting into Samhain, a lot of people, I mean, there's different dates, right? Like right around that calendar time, that last weekend of October into November. And so you have All Saints, All Souls, Halloween, Samhain, and some people put a specific date on Samhain. I've seen people do October 31st. I've seen them do November 1st. I don't really think that matters. I tend to do it as I tend to do it by astrology. So that would
Yeah.
be the first. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, so you get it. It's the first full moon in the sign. Yeah. So I tend to date it by astrology. But this is interesting because I don't talk about this a lot, but I do actually work with some of the gods from the Welsh pantheon as well. And I haven't done any writing about it, so nobody really knows unless they've, done ritual with me or classes or things like that. But so there is a deity in Welsh mythology named Gwyn ap Neith, and and Gwyn ap Neith is a very interesting character. He is not human. He is of the Fae, of the other world, and not only that, he is the ruler of the other world. And the other world is it's hard to describe. It's a place where the Fae live. It's a place where ancestors and the dead live. It's a place where potentially lucky humans and poets wander in and out. There's a giant cauldron there it says that it's warmed by the breath of nine maidens, and the cauldron spews out poetry and prophecy. So this is the realm that Gwyn ap Neith is in charge of. And one of the things that he does is he rides out for the wild hunt. And one of the times that he does this is at Samhain, or in Welsh, you would say Nos Galan Gaeaf, which means the night of Samhain, basically. Um, and so he rides out from the other world, and he has this whole host of beings, and they're fae, and they're phantasmic, and they're phantoms and ghouls, and people riding goats, and just all of this kind of, like, if you can think of all of the like spooky ooky kind of imagery. And they're on a wild hunt for souls. They're gathering up souls that might be wandering, that might be lost. They're also, they might also come and take you away to the other world if you are, not, if you're disrespecting the land, if you are, a person who's not of integrity, things like that. And he's a pretty formidable character, a bit of a trickster, a bit of a death god, bit of a fae, all of those kinds of things. And one of the things that you can do, that we do on Nos Galangaeaf, is we leave out offerings for the wild hunt. And so, and there are a lot of dogs in the wild hunt, the Kunanun, so basically the dogs of the other world. And they're white and they have red ears. Yeah, so that's how you know them. And so on that night, you put out sort of things that they might need on their trip, right? So it's very common to put out bread and butter. It's common to put out milk or wine or something like that. Um, and I usually put out like some kind of little like meat or something like that the animals would like. And you put all that out on your front doorstep, and you light like a single candle, right? So they can see it. I usually use, again, because I like to modernize things. I use an electric light because safety first, kids, right? You're leaving this outside. So, you leave out those things for them. And, if you do that, that's a sign of respect and a sign that you honor the old ways, you honor the traditions, you honor the land. And so they'll come by and take your offering and pass you right on by. The thing is, you have to remember on that night, if you hear the sound of dogs barking at night, that's the wild hunt. And because, this is a fae being who's very tricky, the further away the dogs sound, the closer they are to you. So I mean, that's like yeah, it's very interesting. And a lot of people report like hearing dogs bark and then like actually feeling like the wind pick up a little bit and
Oh,
things like that.
wow.
Yeah, in fact, and there was one, I think it was 2 years ago on Nose Calangaeaf. My partner again was helping me. He's kind of like my witch assistant. He helps me do all these things. So we're putting out our offerings, and I light the candle and I put it down. And just as I put it down, you can hear dogs barking. And I like stood up and I looked at him. I'm like, "Did you hear that?" And he just looked at me and just shook his head. And he's like, "I really hate it when you do that." And he just walked back inside. But yeah, it's so that's a Samhain thing, That's a Samhain thing. Gwyn Neath and the Wild Hunt are riding that night and around that time. So
Is there a particular day that you would say to do this? Or is it kind of free, like you were talking about different people do Samhain on different nights? Do you have any thoughts on?
I would do it. I mean, I do it on the night of the full moon, but I think that kind of I think really any time within that sort of very liminal couple weeks there, where you're at the end of October and early November, because in my personal belief, time is a bit of an illusion, right?
Right.
So,
I
you,
agree.
you know, so I always tell people, do what you can. Do what you can. Try to get as close as you can. But if you have to do it a little bit before or a little bit after, it still counts. I feel like magic is something that can stretch kind of across distance and through time. And kind of, go where it needs to go. So I wouldn't tell people to stress about it too much. If you want to pick like a date, I would pick November 1st.
I love it. I absolutely love it. You guys, this is getting so much fun and juicy and exactly beautiful. So, we're talking about other worlds. We're talking about a veil, right?
Mhm.
And it's very common concept for people to say, "Oh, the veil's getting thin. Ooh, the veil's getting thin." And I think that there are times that it gets thinner, not just because of the season and the weather changing and autumn coming. I think that that kind of the releasing and the end where it gets thin. But I also think that the veil gets thin because collectively we're saying the veil is thin. So, what I would love to hear is like, you don't need a scholarly thought, but what do you think? How do you perceive the veil and what makes it get thinner around this time, if it does?
Uh, well, I mean, I guess in my own personal belief system, I would see the realm of the unseen or the realm of these other worlds. I feel like they're directly parallel to ours. They're just layered right on top of each other, and there is a bit of a veil. I guess you would call it a veil, but to me, it's an awareness really more than a veil. So I feel like you might feel the same. Like I feel like I often interact with the unseen. They're around me all the time in communication. They're reacting to what I'm doing, and like so there's for me, there's not a veil really anymore, but it's because I have that awareness and because I've developed that relationship with beings that are unseen to me, that are non-corporeal, but but I still know they're there, and it's very evidential and very real and physical for me. I think for our culture, especially like here in North America, where you and I are, I think that, yes, we're like a bunch of people are saying the veil is thinning, right? So they're speaking it into existence. And then I think that there's also that's when people are open to it, right? They sort of open their minds a little bit and they're like, okay, I think it might be fun to be a little spooky or a little scared or to, maybe pay attention to those shivers that are crawling up my spine. And it's kind of they're giving themselves permission to actually be aware of those parallel worlds that just overlay the world that we're in. Um, So yeah, I don't think there's actually a veil. It's more of a awareness for me, if that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense. It's just like, oh, well, this is the seen, and anything that's unseen is divided by a perceived unseen veil that we can understand as a curtain because that's what we understand to like divide. But I love that. And one of the other things in Samhain, like how do you approach Samhain um from your point of view beyond what you're saying? And especially when it comes to death, dying, and all things like that. Last time we had such a brilliant conversation around just like, especially like you said, us in North America may struggle with the concepts of death more so, maybe even than other cultures, because we don't have the time or because things are always processed outside of our view and we're not participatory. But there's a lot of people around that may be tapping into this podcast that are like, I want to, my somebody just passed, or this person passed, my sister just left. Is she here? What does Jamie have to say about that? Where did my sister go, Jamie? Yeah, I know. Put you on the spot, right?
Well, honestly, your sister, I can't tell you where your sister went. I'm guessing she probably went to the afterlife dimension that of her preference, honestly. That's kind of what I think,
Love that.
it's my loose sort of idea of what
I
happened.
agree. I agree with you 100,
Yeah,
Jamie. I do. Yeah.
yeah. But, I think so. I guess to first of all, I think that, the dead are always among us, no matter what. They are around us all the time. Again, they're part of that unseen world that is actually just around us, even though if we don't have awareness. And some people actually purposely kind of shut off their awareness. They're like, I don't want to know. Like,
Right.
I can't explain it. I don't want to know. But when it comes to especially like the recently deceased, like say a family member or a close friend or someone that has just died, I'm often asked like, well, should I try to contact them or should I just leave them alone?
Right.
Which is a
Right.
great question, right? And so that's what, when you ask me that, it's kind of what I thought about. And what I tell people is I say let your deceased loved one take the lead. Okay. So they are probably, if you're in close relationship, they're probably going to contact you somehow. Either they're going to send you a physical sign. Very common signs are birds, butterflies, things like that. Coins, money, things, something fun you can do is if you know the loved one is dying, you can agree on signs, right? Because that's like
Yes.
really, really fun, right?
Yes.
But what will often happen, and what does happen to me quite frequently, is when someone dies, it's you can begin contacting them and doing that sort of ancestor work with them once they appear in your dreams.
Oh,
So, which is, I think that probably, I'm just guessing, when you land in whatever afterlife you land in, there's probably a little period where you're adjusting,
sure.
right? It's like when you move somewhere new, you're figuring out where the grocery store is, where the gas station is, where to walk your dog, do all those things. So there's an orientation period probably, and they're probably doing some things that they need to do to get settled. But once they show themselves to you, I think that that's the key, that yes, like they're settled enough that we can move this thing forward. So
I
I
love
would
it.
say, pay attention to your dreams, especially when you have a very close friend or a loved one that passes over.
I love that because, it was really interesting to me when my father passed over. I am used to feeling his spirit here on earth, and I could feel he was gone. It was the first time I've
Yeah.
ever felt that because he had been around my whole life, right? He's my father. And it was the first time I ever was like, whoa, his spirit does not exist here on earth. And I kind of had a little bit of an existential crisis around
Yeah.
what? Because I'm like, well, I'm freaking granddaughter Crow. You'd think that I would be able to access my deceased father, and I couldn't find him. I couldn't hear him, but and I'll tell you that, but There was one point when I looked in the mirror after about 3 days of just feeling lost. I looked in the mirror and I was like, oh, that's his nose. These are his
Yeah.
cheekbones. These are his eyes. And I just looked in the mirror and I was like, he lives within me. I
Mhm.
am the future of my father and his spirit and his voice. And it just brought me a lot of comfort because then I knew I carried him with me. And then about, a little while later, he showed up in a dream. He wasn't
Mhm.
91 years old dead.
Yeah.
He was like 32 years old and he was all in shape and he was like, hey, let me give you some wisdom. And I was like, so he did come and share that with me, but I really like that, letting them take the lead. I think that that's very beautiful. And also knowing that the consciousness is there and the beauty around that there are some people who refuse for whatever reason, and I will not challenge them on it. If their psyche isn't ready to go there, don't go there. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I I
Yeah.
honor that. I honor that. And it kind of wants me to, it begs the question around your book, the one Hades and the Underworld and all of that. From that perspective, how would that Hades and the Underworld perceive the dead, or from that perspective, how would you talk about death? Because a lot of people think that Hades is the Lord of Death and it's hell that you're going to and all of these things. And I just kind of
Oh,
want to
okay.
break a little bit of that thought up and get the truth, you know?
So, so for yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. So first of all, Hades is not the god of death. Hades is the king or the ruler, or as his epithet says, the host of the realm of the dead. So he is the one that is in charge of the realm. And the realm of the dead in ancient Greek mythology is a vast place and it has many different areas. It's by and large not a scary place. And I think of it like, I almost equate it to an airport terminal, right? It's like you've gone to the airport and you're waiting for your next flight. Like that's basically where you've landed. That's the Asphodel Fields of the underworld, which is where most of us go. And it's not a bad place or a good place. You're just sort of floating around until it's time for you to reincarnate again. What's fascinating about ancient Greek philosophy and mythology is that it was actually the default state of being human was being dead, like not being alive. Like you're occasionally alive, but you're more often than not, you're dead and you're in the underworld,
I love
you know.
that.
Be yeah, because there is the cycle of reincarnation, of being born again and doing things over again. Sometimes if you are an especially virtuous person or you engage in certain mystery traditions, you can go to the Elysian Fields, which is kind of there it's a beautiful, bright, sunny place. It's very calm, it's very comfortable. Um, and if you're able to kind of attain that, 3 times or more times, you have the choice to escape the circle of incarnation if you want to, by going to live on the Isle of the Blessed. So it's even in death, there's agency going on, and there's not really, Hades also is not the judge of the dead. There are actually 3 individuals that are the 3 judges that all mortal shades like pass through, when they're, and that's kind of like sorting, almost like a sorting hat, like you go here, you go here, you go here, kind of thing.
Nice.
And yeah, so it's a very different perspective. It's definitely not the Christian hell. Like when we talk about Hades versus hell, we're talking about 2 different mythologies entirely. So the reason that they get mixed up sometimes is we had a bit of a lost in translation issue, and I think that we talked about that last time. It's because an ancient Hebrew word was translated into the New Testament into Greek, and the word was Sheol, which is a certain place that in the Jewish afterlife, and it's not necessarily equal with what Hades is. And Hades is the name of the god and the name of the underworld. A lot of times people will just call the whole realm Hades after its ruler. I tend not to, because I don't want to confuse people. So when I say Hades, I'm talking about the god, and when I say the underworld, I'm talking about the realm. But Sheol is not equivalent to Hades, but it was translated as Hades, as the
Gotcha.
Greek word Hades, and that's how it made its way into the New Testament, right? And then you have some writers that came along like Dante and John Milton, and so they were very creative, and they just kind of incorporated Greek mythology into their like religious prose.
Right.
And so you get like these things kind of overlapping and intersecting in ways that um unfortunately were not the best for Hades and his underworld.
Right.
Because it's just not equivalent,
Right.
basically the idea that I want people to take away. And yeah, it's not really a place to be feared, or a god to be feared, really. Yeah. And,
I,
unless you're a bad guy, you're not doing what you should. That's really that's really what, the only thing you need to worry about. So
I really love that, and I can assimilate that even though I haven't worked or dedicated a lot to Hades. Just from a shamanistic point of view, I go to the underworld all the time. Like, I'm more connected to the underworld than the upper world because that's where I can do stuff. That's where I can,
mhm.
like, for me, the upper world, it's more like learning or, I'm getting guidance, I'm getting direction, I'm learning stuff like that. But the underworld is kind of where you get to do stuff. That's kind of how I see it from my shamanic practice.
Yeah.
So I absolutely love the underworld personally, and I'm
Yeah, I
digging
do
what you say.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I feel like, again, and it could be maybe just because you and I are very practical in our practices. Yeah, it's there. The if you're up in like the Uranic realms is what it would be in the Greek
Okay.
tradition, like up there, kind of in the ethers. It's just it's fine. It's not like good or bad. There's no like sort of like designation like that. I just prefer the vibes of the underworld, I think,
Two.
And yeah, and I think I love how it's very, one of the unexpected things that I discovered is how nourishing the underworld can be. How Because Hades has seen the vast sort of all facets of humanity. I mean, he's been doing this for a very, very long time, and there's like nothing that could happen in your life, or nothing that you feel you need to hide, that he hasn't seen or had experience with. So I feel like there's a type of acceptance in the underworld that it's often hard to find other places. And you won't really be judged for those things that in your day-to-day life, the persona you have to show to the world are maybe not safe for you. And Hades, like, not only his realm is not only sort of where all of the shades of mortals are, right? His
Right.
realm also includes everything beneath the surface of the earth. So, the dirt that grows plants, all of those like precious minerals and crystals that we enjoy, and things that, like natural gas and oil deposits, and all of those things are part of his realm. So there's a real sort of earthy groundedness and nourishment that I did not expect at all before I started working with him.
So beautiful. Well, it makes sense. It feeds your roots, right? I mean, it's where we all come from and it's ancient. And so here's a question as we start wrapping up. Let's say that there is a listener who doesn't have, is not in the situation where they can externally practice. So they
Right.
couldn't do something like this on Samhain or Halloween.
Yeah.
Is there like a secret way, a little fun witchy way that maybe a broom closet witch or a cultist or spiritually curious person could just go, well, Jamie Waggoner and Granddaughter Crow said that time is elusive and I really want to just eat this cookie and share it with a deity or my passed over sister or something and then bury it? Is there something that they could do, or would that be disrespectful? Could they be creative in that way, or?
No, I don't think it would be disrespectful, especially if you're so in magic, intention means a lot. Intention powers a lot of things. It's very important not to give it more weight than impact, right? Like we want to make sure that we're considering our impacts when we do things, especially if they might, impact others beyond ourselves. But let's go back to intention for a second, right? I just had to say that. I had to be like, okay, let's be safety kids. Let's consider impact. But let's go
I
back
love
to
it.
intention. So intention is it does, it fuels magic. And if you can quiet your mind and center your focus, it can be as easy to if for example, I'll just use the example of Hades because that's what I'm most familiar with. um, I greet Hades each morning just with a very, very deep breath, first of all. And it's, I'm offering him that breath. And and people don't realize what a powerful offering that is for someone who is non-corporeal. I'm actually giving them some of my life,
Mm.
right? Like, and allowing them, I even go so far as inviting Hades to experience me, like experience it like I experience it physically, like the inhale and like the lungs opening up and the exhale of the big bellows of the lungs pushing it out. Nobody has to know what you're doing. It's a completely silent process. And I think the other thing that's real easy and approachable for folks to do is to light a candle. I mean, lighting a candle is pretty innocuous. Like if you don't tell anybody what you're doing, they're probably not going to know. And again, don't worry if you live in a place where you're not allowed to have open flames. Get yourself an electric candle. The deities are not going to care. The gods are not going to care. They care that you took the time to get something and you took a quiet moment, sent out your intention and lit that thing intentionally. That's what they care about. It's that action that you're taking, right? Not sort of how the structure or the setup or how it looks on the outside, right? Because that intention it's like a beacon, like it will go out and it will be received. um and there's lots of times where you can, if you want to engage in these practices of having the dinners or leaving offerings, things like that. um just go to a park or a lake and maybe feed some birds, right? Pick something you can do that's not really going to cause too much suspicion or people looking at you funny. But again, the intentional part is what's happening. You're walking up, you're taking a moment, you're taking that breath, you're tearing up those little bread pieces or whatever you're doing, and just like in your heart saying, this is the offering for my ancestors, or this is the offering for the wild hunt, or this is the offering for the whatever. Because I think that signal will be heard loud and clear.
Yeah. That is absolutely amazing. Jamie, thank you so much. And I'm looking forward to your next book whenever it comes out. Maybe I could convince you once again to join us on Belief, Being, and Beyond. And um,
Yeah, of course.
y- yeah, and so you guys check out like The Way of the Weaver, go to jamiewagner.com. Follow Jamie on social media. I think it's just JM Wagner.
Yeah, yeah, everywhere. I mean, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, it's just J.M. Waggoner. Yeah,
I
all the
love it.
places. I try to make it as easy as I
Yeah.
can.
Yeah, I just absolutely loved. Thank you so much for sharing this with us, because as we gain and grow and try to focus our lives in this very crazy world that we might be experiencing, it's really nice to have people who authentically practice practical magic and work with deities that can come into our podcast or we can watch on YouTube to remind us it's food for the soul about what this season is. And I really honor you and all that you stand for, and I just really appreciate you. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh my gosh, the same right back to you.
Wow. So anyway, and back to you listeners. We love you and all that you stand for and everything. Please like, subscribe, follow. But I would love to hear if anybody has any other stories about Hades, the underworld, the hunt, all of that kind of stuff. Let's start engaging. You can comment below. I will see it. I will comment back. And I am just so excited. Listening audience, thank you so much. Have a wonderful autumn, Samhain, however you celebrate this time. And thank you for tuning in. I love you, and we'll see you on the flippity flip. As the Veil Thins series, join us as Granddaughter Crow interviews spiritual leaders in riveting conversations about this time of year.